published in April of 2020.
Timing is everything.
Yeah, some stuff's happened since then, hasn't it?
Oh, God.
What effect do you think the pandemic had on the world of entrepreneurs in general?
I mean, for some, it was an absolute and total disaster, right? If you had a retail business, if you had a business in hospitality, if you had a restaurant, right? Mm-hmm. Tough shit. And it was decimating to many. And yet, what was interesting is that very quickly you saw that entrepreneurial spirit of those business owners. Like, they were the ones who were able to pivot to, delivery and sidewalk tables and changing their business to all of a sudden sell like sanitizer and masks, or, they were able to make those changes in a way that was not only able to keep them in business, but like serve their communities, help people. That was a really incredible thing to see. You saw a lot of that, and you saw a lot of dissatisfaction with people working their regular jobs, right? When all of a sudden your job was like, oh, you're going to do this video call all day, every day for 9 hours straight. Suddenly there's like this desire for people to do something that's more meaningful for them and more freeing. I think people got a sense of that. So, entrepreneurship grew largely because certain businesses shut down. Certain people had to leave sectors. If you were a server in the hospitality business, like after a few months, you might have gotten emergency support from the government, but like you got to do something. And a lot of people went and started their own companies, started their own businesses, doing all sorts of different things. So entrepreneurship saw growth, and a growth not just in the kind of cool, fancy, well-funded startups, but like the everyday entrepreneurship that had been lacking. It also got a cultural lift. I think we venerated the hot startups that would be able to make amazing, profits or growth, not often profits in that world of startups. And we're able to, get these crazy billion-dollar valuations, and like that, the wheels kind of came off the bus with that, with Theranos and with WeWork and, a bunch of these other companies, some that ended in scandal and some that just like fizzled. But what you saw was the value of those street level entrepreneurs in your own community really grew. Like, when suddenly you walked around your neighborhood and you saw restaurants were boarded up or had brown paper on their walls, you realized that those things were more valuable than just the money or the products that they were able to put into the community. The entrepreneurs that are part of your world, your neighborhood, like, they actually mean more. They're part of the community. They're the link between the people that live there, the other businesses. They're the eyes on the street. They're the ones that sponsor, the Little League team and the school fair. I was just out drumming up silent auction donations for our school's fun fair in June. Yeah. If you're in Toronto and you want to donate, please let me know. Those entrepreneurs are an integral part of the community. And I think we only got to really see the value of that when those businesses were threatened. And then when those businesses were able to sort of give us that lifeline. Like, if you lived in a place that didn't have a coffee shop that put a couple benches out on the sidewalk where people could sit and drink their coffee in those first months of the pandemic, and it was like the only place you could go, Starbucks wasn't doing that. They were like, corporate lawyers were like, no, there's liability here. Restaurants weren't doing it. Like, suddenly these local businesses became the lifeblood of our communities. And yeah, you could order anything from one of these apps and they'll deliver it. But like, there was that deeper connection when we needed to feel more human.
Speaking about entrepreneurs in general, do you think the government has a role in supporting them? Like, for example, you live in a country with universal healthcare. I don't.
Right.
What difference do you see that making when it comes to people starting their own business?
So statistically speaking, the research isn't necessarily conclusive, but it doesn't. It's not as clear cut, right? One would think that like, oh, the countries with the greatest social safety net would have the higher rates for entrepreneurs, but France or Germany doesn't necessarily have a higher rate than the United States. From a practical level, from people I know, like, I have friends in the US who would like, I would love to go out on my own. I would love to be freelance, but what would I do about healthcare, right? It is not something that has ever crossed my mind or crossed the mind of any entrepreneur, here in Canada, who doesn't have to think about that. So that is a major thing. But that's a much bigger question. I mean, again, it removes a significant barrier for people. A major financial barrier, and I think a psychological one too, right? You hear about, people get sick and that's it. The business is done because so-and-so got sick. They couldn't, they couldn't afford it. The health plan wouldn't cover it, or they had to choose between the business and paying for their healthcare. That's sort of a terrible choice, but that's a much bigger question. It's one I get from a lot of Americans who interview me. So it's obviously a major issue, but does it, if the US adopted, Medicare for all or whatever, like, would that you see a surge of entrepreneurship tomorrow? I don't know. You would probably see different people going into it. You would probably see that risk being lowered for certain people, younger people, maybe people with young families, people who wouldn't have been able to afford to go into it. And that would perhaps change the way we think about entrepreneurship.